In this video, we're going to start programming for the CNC lathe. In the previous video, we set up our stock and our chuck. Remember that we have excess material sticking out on the nose of the part. We would use this as part of our setup procedure. When setting up the CNC lathe, what we will typically do is take the first tool, our master tool, and nip a corner into the material. We will then set Z0 to that position. Once all the tools have been set, X, if you remember, is our diameter. It will not change. A 1-inch diameter will always be a 1-inch diameter. So setup on the CNC lathe is fairly simple. All we have to do is set our Z0 position for our material. We are then going to face our part down to Z0. So typically our first operation is going to be a facing operation. In order to do that, we are going to go to turning, and we are going to find the facing option. If it's not visible, we can always click the drop down and then find face. From here, we are going to grab our first tool, and in this case, we're going to run the default tool library. If we were programming for our lathe at the high school, we would be selecting the SHS tool library. In this case, I'm going to grab this first tool here, which is a roughing tool. I will click it, and now I'm going to come into my parameters. Again, using a correct tool library is important because it will always have the correct tool numbers for our machine. In this case, it is tool number 1. We do not need to change anything. Our feed rate of 0.01 inches per revolution will be acceptable. Our spindle speed for aluminum on our machine, we're going to run about 300, which is a cutting speed. So that means that it will actually vary the RPM of the machine as the diameter decreases. If we were programming for our lathe at the school, I would be turning the coolant off simply because we don't run enough material for cooling to be really advantageous to us. It makes more of a mess than it does prolong our tool life. If we were in production, we would most definitely be running coolant. Our lathe maxes out, if my memory serves me, at 2,000 RPM. So we can set a max spindle speed. 10,000 was pretty high. Remember, as our tool moves into X0, that lathe is going to get faster and faster and faster. The tool home position. The default is diameter 10, Z10. Our machine does not go to a diameter of 10. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of set machine, I'm going to set user define, and I'm going to define my home position. This is where the tool will return to implement a tool change. So it needs to clear the material enough so that as that tool carousel spins, we don't have any collisions. We have found that a value of D5, Z3 works very well for our machine. So we set that. Now going to go into face parameters. I'm going to use the stock. I'm going to finish Z at 0. My entry amount, 0.1 is a good safe entry, means it'll start its cutting speed 1/10 of an inch away. I'm not worried about rough step over. If I knew I had to remove a lot of material or I had a very hard material, I might want to change this rough step over to 0.05 in the case of steel. In this case, I don't need to adjust it. I can leave all the default values for finish step over, overcut amount, etc. Stock to leave, we want to make sure is set to 0. So the idea is this will come down and face to 0. If I quickly backplot this, we will see that our tool starts out here at that home position, travels inward, begins its cut, takes the face of the part out, and then will return back to that position for a possible tool